All right, so I think you guys got a good flavor for the kinds of people and the perspectives around the room. Over the next 2 days, get names, numbers, make long-term relationships if you haven't already, and get to understand what people are doing, because this is cutting through the marketing and the selling and the positioning by big vendors telling you what you should do, what you shouldn't do, by actually sitting next to people that are actually doing and how they're achieving. And we all get to learn from that here. And that's the point on this conversation. And that's the point of this whole effort. So what is service availability? What does it mean? Why is it important? Do you think it's important? Do you think it's vital? In your list of importance, is this high or is this low? Is this vital? Is this something you can't live without or you just deal with? The world of DDoS, it's funny, I've been in this world, and my background, I think many of you know, I used to run Radware's security portfolio for 10 years. And before that, I was at SunGard, which is an availability service company. I ran the security business at SunGard for 6 years. So I've been in availability, and before that, I was a B-52 guy. So I don't know if that means I was availability or not. Good morning, Dan. We just did introductions. I just do a quick introduction yourself. I'll pause for a second.
Yes, Dan Napier, Netseed.
Yes, welcome. Sorry about your journey.
Oh, that's no problem.
He's coming in from
Minnesota.
Minnesota, that's right. Yep, Minnesota. And so when I first started in the industry of DDoS, almost every time I said DDoS, I had to explain what DDoS was, right? And then, that even within tech people, and then it got to be in the news, and every time you said DDoS to some lay person that was a reporter, you had to explain what DDoS is. And you would see them write in the articles, distributed denial of service attacks, a form of cyber attack, that kind of thing. And magically, somewhere along the way, DDoS just became a word. That acronym became a word, and it now really means, and it's akin to service availability, although it's not always distributed denial of service attacks. We'll get into that whole piece of it. I believe, and this is the mission that I think we're on at Corero, and we'll talk more about that service availability has never meant more today than it ever has, and it's a result of all businesses, I would say, riding on some sort of technology that has become endemic to that business, and that technology is delivered to customers, business or retail, consumer, that requires at its basic elements, like oxygen, it requires service availability. It is like oxygen to the business, right? And without it, the business stops. It's that vital. And if you think about it at the largest level, that's really what we're talking about. So I just want to go over a couple of what I would call musings and mysteries of service availability or DDoS, rules or concepts. It's more of a level-setting conversation, but these are like how I would think about having been in this business for a very long time and how I think about things as a general rule of thumb. And I like to kind of settle it down, and I actually think that these are good elements to rotate around and really think and have conversations over dinner. I believe service availability means the existence of a business today. I mean, I think you can agree that most businesses would not exist without the ability to actually have technical connectivity to the business. Multi-factor authentication just alone is a demonstration that you probably can't access what you want to access without actually having a service that's actually helping you gain identity, right? And you can go on and on and on with this idea that without that, I can't gain access. Without this, I can't do. Without the ability to connect, it's fundamental, vital to business. It's really everything. This idea of service availability vulnerabilities, though, is not endemic to most technical people. I believe, and I'm a security person first, that my security brethren focus and over-rotate on confidentiality and mostly compliance around data and data security, which is a very, very important part of security. Of the world of security vendors, about 90% of all security vendors fall in trying to solve the problem of confidentiality or compliance, right? Of the other 3 domains in security that's acknowledged, there's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. About another 5 or 10% list themselves in the integrity space, the ability to do encryption and checksums. The decimal point is in the same spot when it arrives from when it was departed. And only about 5% of all cybersecurity companies own the problem of availability as a technical solution and are fighters, warriors, at trying to help companies stay up and available. We're one of those companies. It's a world that most security people actually eschew, and most networking people actually are not comfortable with. It's a world that you live between the gray areas, between the two of them. That's our world, right? So this is the weird world. For whatever reason, we're all sitting in this seat, and that's the world that we're in. But being able to do vulnerability management in that world means different things than vulnerability management in data security or in integrity security. It's mostly a world of resource problems, resource exhaustion, bottlenecks, technical bottlenecks, architecture problems, protocol rule problems, single points of failure. How many times have you, just think about this rhetorically, sat back and said, do I have a bottleneck in my environment? Where is it? How many of them do I have? And where are they to be located? How do I know whether or not I have resiliency in design, resiliency in service, resiliency in vendor, resiliency in technology, resiliency in protocol rules? We don't do these things. It's not a rule. It's an exception if you do, right? This is the world that we live in. This is the world we try to help you with. It's just something I put to you. I use the world, and I'm going to give you this for whatever it's worth, kind of analogy, because I use it a lot for talking to my children or people that are LA. I think that we're in a world very similar to filtering water. I know that the analogy won't hold 100%, but just think about this for a second. You know that municipal water sources have to do some filtering, often because of laws and sundry reasons. But you also know, if you think about it, 4 reasons, mostly really science reasons: flow and pressure and service availability. The municipality cannot scrub 100% of the particulates that are in the water. And there's many reasons for it. It's very rare. And once it leaves the municipality, it will pick up contaminants in any of the conduit to and from wherever the endpoint is. That's if there's nobody after doing bad things, right? And each endpoint has its own unique particulate problem. The conduit is different for every single endpoint that goes there. So there is a value proposition to a filtering solution that can be done better locally at the tap or at the faucet. Same holds true in our business. We do filtering at the cloud, and we do filtering at the premise. It's acknowledged, I think, today by most of us, if not all, the best filtering is, just like with water, is both of those things going on. We call that hybrid in our today's world, right? There's a juxtaposition that, just like municipal water filtering, that cloud scrubbing, and I knew this at Radware when we designed the Radware solution and so forth, cannot, for many reasons, we can go through the reasons, cannot scrub a DDoS or a particulate problem in the cloud 100%. You're going to have leakage. And if you get to the position where you can scrub nearly 100%, let's say you can scrub 100%, the likelihood that you're scrubbing good traffic, which is one of the biggest problems with a good scrub in the cloud, is very high. In other words, you're going to be scrubbing legitimate traffic. So typically, the filtration is set lower so that you allow for certain kinds of low-level leakage or bad. The juxtaposition is that your best scrub can be done locally, mainly because the detection of the problem or the characterization of the problem can be done with great granularity locally, that there's a juxtaposition. You can't handle all the problems that come to you because the filter is too fine, so you can't scrub them. So The other problem is that the nature of this problem means that the detection and the mitigation, the detection and the response has to be within seconds. It's like, I mean, it's almost implied, right? But it has to be that fast because this is, after all, an availability problem, right? You can't take even seconds or minutes, forget hours or days, which is where most people are on these kinds of things. In addition, you can see that there's problems both in volume and non-volume. So I put some rules on the right side to kind of talk about volume and non-volume. People will often say application or network level DDoS. I think it's a misnomer because you can have non-volumetric network problems and you can have volumetric, it's hard, but you can have volumetric application problems. They're two different problems. And people that suggest you can handle them in together is like, Ash is going to give a nice presentation. He gave me a very nice mental model, one from which I'll never forget because I think it's lovely. So I hope you don't mind me using this one. So he said, if you have a problem of something like a volume problem or a network level problem, and then you have a problem on availability that is non-volume, mostly application oriented, it doesn't mean that you solve this problem on the same device or in the same area. It's like your kitchen. Just because every kitchen in the world has a refrigerator and has an oven, it doesn't mean that there's a market for a refrigerator, right? Who wants a refrigerator oven? That's a ridiculous idea, right? It's the same sort of problem here with the solving the solution. So what happens as a result of this is that the problem is often bifurcated in its solution. And that's a place where you have to get your head, right? You get your head in the idea that this is probably not a central filtration solution. It's probably a solution that goes across the entire environment. And probably the more you have detection and filtration going on in your environment all over, probably the better you're going to be able to do at service availability. So that's my diatribe this morning. Who are the companies that are basically innovating in this space at great scale? We are the smallest of the companies that have innovated in this space at great scale. And you can see we are also partners with some of these companies, great partners, like for example with Akamai and Corero. I would characterize our relationship, John and Sean, as forget daily, I think it's hourly, if not even every minute kind of relationship. And then there's other players out there. And I would say that this isn't even our slide, by the way. You can see this is the Mordor Intelligence. I don't know them from Adam, but this is the market today. This says few players, a pretty large market, doubling. So that tells you that, at least in their opinion, that service availability is still a very serious piece of the market. This is why we're here. There's this problem that needs to be solved, and there is a lot of folks that understand it, and they're trying to get it right. Now, I'm going to go through this in just very quick detail, but the point on this is when I first left the military, my very first job out of the military in corporate America was with a company called Campbell Soup Company. You might have heard of it. Actually, Phil worked with me there, actually many, many moons ago. And I was today's equivalent of Chief Security Officer globally for the company. And when I first sat down in a meeting, they had this whole meeting and they were talking about male soups and female soups. And they were talking about children's soups, and I had no idea what they were talking about. And I come to realize that they had segmented the market with the way that they actually marketed their product and the way that they actually put the product together, and that different people wanted different things and different experiences and the way that they actually ate them and so forth. You know what? DDoS is the same way. So DDoS and service availability is the same way. And it's generationally changed. This is a little off, I apologize, the columns. But the idea is that in our world, in our mind, and I want to tell you how we think, and I think there's representation around this room today of this, what I would call categorization of your service segment and how and what you are trying to look for from service availability, from our perspective, from trying to provide innovation in there. And it's a lot like this filter. Sometimes we're viewing you as needing that coarse, high volume, capable filter at a municipal capability. Sometimes you're looking for it at the premise. Sometimes you're looking for both. You want to be the municipality that also sells solutions to your customers at time of need. Or sometimes you want to do that magic that is Corero, which is simply the reason that people really like us, in that we can actually use the conduit to do the scrub, right? So in this idea that there has been this history of first, second, and third generation evolution in what people are looking for in the flow of capabilities. And I'll just go through it quickly. The large service provider, the municipality, in the beginning, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when it first started really with DDoS solution management, it was about a net flow detection capability, and they basically didn't do at large scrubbing. They did traffic management, black hole routing. They did essentially bifurcation of the traffic capability. They were basically just traffic engineers doing traffic management. The second generation, they added on service provider capability and a scrubbing center on the service providers. Today, many of the service providers are trying to get away from scrubbing centers because they're costly and they're very, very complex, and they require a lot of disruption in routing and re-ingestion of traffic and so forth. So they're trying to do it in the conduit with code, with no hardware. And that's the next generation SDN capable, stack capable code. And then as you go down, large enterprises that approximate a lot of times service providers, ASN holders, they have gone from inline, detect and protect, to both flow and packet-based scrubbing centers, sometimes in-house, sometimes outside the house, and now they're doing predictive. So they're adding a lot of ability. The idea is this is to get away from DR, detection and response, because it's too slow, and get into, shouldn't I be able to forecast the weather in a lot of these attacks, right? Shouldn't I be able to predict with intelligence services and so forth how the attack is coming, and ever-increasing sovereign requirements. For those of you that deal with, especially with government contracts, with defense contracts, there's becoming a bigger and bigger push to have your scrub done locally, done sovereignty, right? It's just the way that it's working. And it's for all sorts of reasons. Small enterprises, I think you can read there. Generally, the detection for small enterprises is, I'm down. Swing the traffic, right? So the human is the detection, and the fully managed swing is what they do, right? That's the detect and respond. It's not good enough today, for sure. And there's a question about cost and capability and all of those sorts of things. But that's basically been the small enterprise. And governments have been reticent to throw things into the cloud, across the board, across the world. If they do it with sovereignty in mind. They do like the hybrid model for the quality that it comes at it. And they do want to do it locally. So that's one area we don't see a lot of movement wholesale into the cloud for all sorts of reasons as we go through around the world. So what does it mean today? That's the solution set. How is the threat landscape changing? I don't really need to actually articulate, I don't think, to this group the threat landscape very well, other than to say we'll have some presentations on it, and Joao's team, for us, spends every single waking moment actually in this world, and he'll be able to articulate a lot of the technical pieces of the service availability landscape. But just to suffice it to say that I think every once in a while to myself, who are the people, if you were down, that you would talk to be able to get yourself up? That person spends a lot of time, or should, understanding what's going on with this and doing the vulnerability management piece of it for availability, which is different than your typical CVEs or CVSS vulnerability management, which is what we're indoctrinated to think of. It can be inclusive of that. There's some sort of overlap on it, but it's not entirely. It's a design, architecture, bottleneck management kind of conversation, right? And we'll have Jeff give a nice presentation in healthcare about DDoS and so forth. So that's, as we go through this, if you, and I was going to come here today with a bunch of lists of the things that just went down over the last day or two or week and so forth. But I think service availability, you must begin to think, if you haven't already, that it's not necessarily something that's associated with the network. It's not necessarily something that's associated with my server going down. It can actually be something that is the service plane. So take Cloudflare that went down in November. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but they went down. I'm sure our Akamai friends know it. If you're familiar with the Cloudflare outage, we can discuss whether or not it was an attack or not an attack. And they suggest that it was not an attack. It was a problem with technical operations. Now, if you're a security guy like me, I think to myself, if a technical operator can take down a platform like a CDN, one of the biggest ones, by mistake, can you imagine what a bad guy who figured out how to replicate that mistake in bad terms can do with that weapon, right? But their outage was their service plane. What does it mean? When you're a service provider, often you have to provision. When a customer signs on, you know what they signed up for, and there's a provisioning of that goes on, right? And that's just what happens. That service provisioning plane went down on Cloudflare. So there was no DDoS attack. Their servers were up and running. Their network was up and running. Their service plane went down. And as a result, their whole business was down, right? That's service availability at its core. So what is Corero? What have we done? So Joao says he's been around for 23 years. And I always have this like philosophical conversation with him because the company's only been around for 10, right? But what he means by that is that we're a reboot in some ways of an older company that was purchased in terms of its tech and its patents and was rebrought to life with that tech and with that capability as Corero, right? So what was the name of the company again? I forgot. Top Layer. You guys remember Top Layer? I don't know if you remember Top Layer. But it was a company that did IPS and and as well as DDoS back in the day. And so that's where Joao came on over from. He was with Top Layer prior to Corero, but he's been in the same seat all the way along. And we have been developing on DDoS and DDoS-specific portfolio for a long time. And what you're going to hear from us in this session is we're going to take this yet even further, and we're going to open up adjacent markets with tech and innovation. And we're going to call for you guys to help us to do it. If you're interested in being a design partner with us, this is a no-fee kind of thing, right? This is just taking advantage of, what could be the next step in the evolution. But we're looking for people to help us vet out the next tech, and we have some good ideas where we want to go. We want to hear from you if you think that we're full of it, or if that makes a lot of sense, right? So that's privileged information, but it's privileged, that's why you're here. In addition, and by the way, Sean, thank you for these slides because these are exactly your slides redone. We have been innovating on the problem since the beginning. So if you want to partner, and there's a few of us out there, but if you want a partner that's focused on this, it's reliably on top of this, that it reliably understands the problem that you can't always focus on, that's us, right? And I know that's a little bit of a sales pitch, and I'm shameless about it, but that's what we're doing and what we're bringing to market, and we'll continue to do that. Ash has been, along with Julian, on the forefront for us in the company on being able to do all of these things, and we'll continue to maintain that leadership. We're recognized, and I think we'll talk more and more about this. Honestly, I think the company has been quite humble in its outbound conversations and marketing up until this point. I like to think of myself a humble guy, but I like to make sure that the market also respects us, and you'll start to see a lot more of this kind of thing as we move forward. All right, so what should you expect? I hope and pray that at the end of the 2 days that you'll come out of this with the feeling that, by golly, I got to do this on a routine basis. I want to be imbibed on this conversation on a routine basis because it really settles me on how I'm thinking about things and who and where and why I'm doing things. And it gives me the kind of contacts and arm reach conversations that are not normally available to me in my business. That's what I expect at the end of two days. And I hope that we actually all become friends if we're not already along the way. So that's the journey. And last slide, I want us to have fun. It's not a requirement, but let's try along the way. Let's see, do we have Mr. Rob Spalding, you're up next. Any questions on this? If not, I'm going to hand it on over to my good friends, Rob Spalding, and thank you again.